So the first person up is going to be Matthew. Matthew works for a company called SocialFlow. SocialFlow is one of our sponsors. They have a pretty awesome plugin that I think just got rewritten, correct?
In the process of rewriting it now.
Okay.
Yes, so I can tell you a little bit about it. So I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about SocialFlow tonight, and I can talk a little bit about the plugin tonight.
Awesome.
All right. So we're sponsoring this, so I guess I'll just talk a little bit about what SocialFlow does. I won't keep you like too long, but I'll tell you a little bit about what our plugin does as well. SocialFlow is a company that has an optimization suite of products that are focused on optimizing your content for social. So we work with a lot of publishers, a lot of which use WordPress. We're also a WordPress VIP partner. So if you go to that, I just got that thing on the 29th, I guess. If you go to that party that Renan Barco invited us to, I'll see you there. Some of our customers, for instance, are Mashable, Salon, a lot of Fox local TV networks in the South that use WordPress. So what we focus on for most of these customers is publishing to Facebook and Twitter. And the way that we do that, we have full access to the Twitter Firehose. We have a lot of Facebook data through our publishers who opt in, so that's like Associated Press, Al Jazeera, CNN, Financial Times, all the Gawker properties, Mashable, Salon, like I said, and a bunch of others. We look at basically which segment of your audience is available. So here I'm looking at, it was a little bit slow, so I'm trying to get to a publisher that would actually mean something to you. But we look at which segment of your audience is actually available. So by parsing the Twitter Firehose, we're looking at who's actually there, who's actually engaging at this time, and what is it that they're talking about. So for publishers, it makes a lot of sense. For people who use WordPress and are publishing there, it makes a lot of sense because if you're publishing a lot of content and you know how it works on social, just because you have something to say doesn't mean that you should actually say it. So by saying too much, you can often pay a penalty. So for instance, with The Economist, who was one of the early case studies that we worked on, they'll be publishing maybe 50 to 100 items per day that they can put out. I don't know how much you guys are publishing, but if you get anywhere upwards of 10 or 15, it could be that you're saying too much. And by publishing to social, by publishing to Twitter or Facebook, first of all, on Facebook, you're going to pay a penalty if you publish more than 5 or 10 items just because of Facebook's Edgerank. On Twitter, if you publish, you'll find that if you have, let's say 50 things that you could publish out on Twitter, if you actually only publish 10 to 15 to 20 of the best items, that you may get better overall engagement for the course of the day than you would if you actually publish all 100. So that's a lot of the concept behind what SocialFlow does, is that you put these items into a queue. So let me find somebody here. So if we get over, we'll go to Forbes. But we will optimize for your Twitter accounts or for your Facebook accounts. So for instance, we'll take things into the queue, and you can get things into this queue, Twitter queue or Facebook queue, through various means. So we can either bring things in through as a content source. So that's what I was talking about. You can bring stuff in by setting up an RSS feed. So when you publish to your CMS, anytime something's published to your RSS feed, we'll automatically bring it into the queue. You can also bring things in via Drupal plugin. I know boo, but you can also bring things in when you publish from WordPress. So there's a WordPress plugin. You can look at it on wordpress.org. You can plug it in, and when you sign up for a SocialFlow account, when you go to publish a blog post, you'll see a WordPress plugin on. The social widget will sit on the right-hand side. It will automatically fill out, the title of your blog post. You can put in the description. The way we're working right now with Matt, and this will give you ideas for other things, whether you use SocialFlow or not. But the way we're working with Mashable and Salon is when you fill out the blog title, the social widget will automatically fill out your blog title on the right-hand side. You can then edit a different social message for Facebook or for Twitter. And then when that blog post publishes, whatever parameters you've set around it, so for SocialFlow, you can optimize things, you can schedule them, you can set them to be on hold. When that blog post publishes, it'll go into a queue. So this is kind of how it works for Forbes. Whenever their CMS publishes something, we consume that and we take it into this left-hand side, which is the queue here. So you can see they have all their accounts opt-in, so @Forbes, @ForbesWomen, @ForbesTech, and then their Facebook accounts as well on the right-hand side, Forbes Life, Forbes Women, Forbes CMO Network. Things come into their queue. Their workflow is generally that they put them on hold. That means that items will come into the queue on hold, so they're not going to publish. They're candidates for possible publication though. The ranking that you see on the left-hand side, that's what's called the attention score. And what SocialFlow is doing here, so we have a team of developers, but we also have a team of data scientists who are coming up with algorithms to understand your audience. They're looking at how well the messaging that you're using here has performed in the past, coupled with which segment of your audience is actually available. So like I was saying, by looking at like the Twitter fire hose in real time, you can see for Forbes that over the last maybe half hour, of their 1 million people that are in their audience, about 18,000 have actually engaged. That's something to note too, is just like when you think about Facebook, Facebook has Edgerank. So every time you publish to your Facebook page, you've probably seen this before, but the maximum it'll go out to is 6% of your actual audience. And that's why it's important to hit that audience when they're actually there and when they're actually ready to engage and when it's actually relevant to them. Because the more people that actually engage with your message on Facebook, the more likely the Facebook Edgerank algorithm is to put it out to a maximum of 16 or 17%. So that's the max that you'll ever reach, even if you get the most engagement through Facebook. That's where you hear, like, after that you need to use promoted posts, etc. But even on Twitter, it's very important to hit at the right time, because even though it's going to go out to everybody, you can imagine yourself, if you're on Twitter, you're following maybe 20 people, maybe 100 people, or whatever else. So if you don't hit people when they're actually there, when they're engaging, think about yourself on Twitter. If it's like 3 scrolls down your Twitter when you log in, or like 3 hours ago and you're following 100 things, you're not actually going to find it. You're not actually going to see that message. So this is what the SocialFlow algorithm actually takes care of, is saying, how many people are actually there, what are they engaging with, then of all the content that you have, what's performed best for you in the past, but also for that audience segment, what are they talking about right now in real time, and then we look at, of the messaging that you have, what's the most relevant to that audience, and if you have it set to optimize, then SocialFlow will make the split-second decision to publish for you to hit the audience when they're mostly there and when it's most relevant to them. Therefore, like getting the best engagement over the course of the hour, day, month, etc. Now, the workflow for Forbes, just while we're looking at it, as a CMS, they get hundreds of items in per day. Generally, what they do through their CMS, and you can do this through the WordPress plugin as well, is you can have SocialFlow consume items, but set an expiration. So, like, they'll have an expiration. Today is the 20th, so they usually set their expiration for 1 day because they're getting hundreds of items in per day. Then their content manager or their community manager will go in, look at what's trending up towards the top, and then generally go in and edit. Maybe edit the message, but edit the status to optimize, schedule, or hold. Well, they'll set the things that are doing well to optimize. They may set another expiration around it, and then that's when they're going to allow SocialFlow to make the decision for them when to publish. So, I mean, that's just a little bit about SocialFlow, a little bit about how the WordPress plugin works, and a little bit about social. I would just say, like, this is where algorithms are coming into play with your publishing decisions and the things that you should think about. Because if you're, like, a community manager and you are, when you're trying to figure out, and you read a lot of this stuff about, like, what's the best time to tweet, or what's the best time to send something to Facebook, and you see stuff like 9 a.m. is the best time to tweet, or like, because most of the world is online at that time. But like, people are weird. Like 9 a.m. might be the best time to tweet about, things that have to do with constructing reports, but 5 p.m. on Friday, if you're, on the East Coast, might be the best time to tweet about beer. That's when people, just because people say they're interested in things, doesn't mean that they want to hear about it at 9 in the morning, or they may want to hear about it at a different time. So the best time to tweet is when, the audience segment who is there and actually engaging, when the content is most relevant to them. So you can think about it a lot like, if you were to walk into Grand Central Station and say, let me try as a as a community manager to listen to all the conversations that are happening in Grand Central at this moment and figure out what's the one thing that I could shout out that's going to be most relevant to all the people who are actually there. So that's very hard to do. That's where like algorithms like this start to come into play, because they can, you know, make they can perform pattern recognition on the things that people are saying, figure out what you have that's most relevant to them, figure out when the most people are listening, and then make the decision to say it for you. So that's kind of where, you know, SocialFlow comes into play. How we work with the WordPress plugin, and you know, I don't have much else to say because we're sponsoring. I don't want to give you guys like a big pitch or try to sell it to you, but just wanted to tell you a little bit about SocialFlow, a little bit how we work with WordPress, and then a little bit about, you know, our theories around, you know, how social works. So go ahead and ask questions.
What is the cost to the average blogger? Is there a cost for using the plugin?
There is a cost. So there is a self-serve component. That's $99 per month per social account, which you can contact us about signing up for. For anyone outside the prosumer where there's an enterprise account, what we sell this to for brands and for major publishers is $25,000 a year.
What about people here?
Well, that's why I said there's a, just so you know, there's a very hidden self-serve sign up, which, you know, you can get to through talking to us, and that's where it's $99 a month per social account, which is obviously much cheaper than the enterprise account, which is $25,000 a year.
Will this work well with the average blogger who may blog once or twice a week, as well as it works with Forbes?
You know, that's a really good question, and you got to figure that out for yourselves. Like, I mean, we even encounter it with, like, you know, for publishers who have hundreds of items per day, it works very well. And a lot of those publishers who have hundreds of items a day use WordPress. So, you know, this is going well for them. Even for large brands, you know, this is something we started to run into. You know, we're working with like Walmart now, we're working with Pepsi and other brands like that. Brands don't have a ton to say, so they wonder like what's the benefit to optimization. You know, what we've started to find is the benefit to optimizing or sending through us is like, we also have a link shortening proxy, so there's tons of data that we can get back. So it's just very interesting, the insights, the benchmarks we set, and how we can show you how to improve, like as you're you know, coming up with your social strategy, publishing out there, seeing how your audience responds. But these are things that you need to decide for yourself. Like, you know, we're very focused on performance. We know that if you set the stuff to optimize, it's like insurance, that your message is going to go out when people are actually there. Whether it's cost effective for you, whether like the return on investment makes sense, is just, you know, something that you have to look into and figure out.
Are these algorithms based on keywords?
So they're not based. They're not really based on keywords. So the interesting thing is, I think the company started around. So he's asking, are the algorithms based around keywords? They're based on pattern recognition. So we publish in like maybe it's 20 some different languages at this point, or we're optimized for. So like we publish for Al Jazeera. So, and we also publish for BBC. So we're doing BBC Russian, BBC Hindi. We're doing, you know, Al Jazeera in Balkan languages, and Turkish, and a couple other ones. So just to give you some like history, the interesting thing that we found was 2.5 years ago when they were building this technology, which was difficult to build because we were trying to parse the Twitter firehose in real time and store this data. I think they used something called Princeton WordNet at the beginning, which was really like sentiment analysis and like understanding words and stuff like that. And what we found was when we actually turned on the Twitter firehose and let that run through our system, it completely destroyed the whole Princeton WordNet, because we realized that, you know, even though we were focusing on Twitter in English, you know, TMZ like takes Brad and Angelina and turns it into Brangelina, or like does whatever they're going to do. Like new words are created every second or every minute on Twitter, and so you can't really base it on like keyword or keyword recognition. So they use pattern recognition in order to look at what are the patterns of the symbols that are in your messaging versus the patterns of the symbols that are being most discussed within your audience, and that's what they focused on, rather than keyword.
How big is WordPress actually in terms of publishing for larger newspapers and magazines?
You know, that's a really good question. I don't know if Steve knows better than I do, because I only know our customers. Like, I know for us, it's well, All Things D. I know now Salon.com. I know Mashable obviously is using WordPress. And then I know there's a bunch of Fox affiliates who are using WordPress, who are using, I don't know, Craig, you might know who else is actually using it. But it seems like, I mean, for me, like Al Jazeera is using Drupal. I know that, so it's interesting. But I don't know the exact percentages. Like, I haven't done that market study exactly. I'm not sure, Steve, if you know. That's a good question, though. Like, it would be interesting to find out.
List off a couple more.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, I know like New York Times, CBS, I'm pretty sure parts of CNN, Bloomberg, just
ABC Central does too.
yeah, a couple different things probably.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine it's got to be a pretty big percentage of using. 2/3 of the top 500?
Yeah,
All right, yeah.
National had an article on that, like in the summer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
So, sort of to piggyback on that same question, I mean, is there like a relevance accuracy number you have? Any example of those?
Like how accurate we are?
In terms of, like, let's say I throw something in the queue in terms of when it releases it, in terms of, I know it's not keywords, but it's patterns, but the relevance for the user in terms of when that actually went out.
Well, the way that we do it, because I think, it'd be, I think you're asking if there's like a kind of relevant score or something. I'm the director of product development there. I'm not the math guy who does all the math stuff. So getting into the weeds on that, I'll get a little bit lost. But the way that we communicate it at this point is like I was talking about. We take those 3 different parameters and a couple other things and look at how well has this language performed in the past, or if there's not enough data on your account and how well your account language has done in the past, then we look at a control group that we have. So we look at how well should these words be able to perform. Then we look at in real time, how much of your audience is actually available, and then what are the patterns within the topics that they're coalescing around on the graph. How do those match up against what you have? So what do you have that's most likely to divert people from the conversations they're coalescing around on the graph to the conversations that you want them to have? And that's where we come up with what we call the attention score. So that's what you see on the left-hand side in this queue is attention score. And really it's a ranking. So it's, of the content you have, what would be the best to send out. But the algorithms then, on top of that, have to make the decision like, if it sends out this one now, it's not going to send out another one in 2 seconds, or the engagement's not actually going to be there. So it has to make, decisions about, what would be the best thing to actually send out, but, it has to also make decisions about what's the best thing to send out in the different time intervals throughout the day to get you better engagement throughout the day, the week, the month, etc.
Is there an analytics dashboard?
Sorry?
Is there an analytics dashboard?
Yeah, there is an analytics dashboard and other stuff. We'll see how slow it takes because we had a little bit of trouble on the with the connection. But there's a dashboard where you can see messages that you send out, how many clicks that you got because we have the click proxy data. Interactions, so these are interactions other than clicks. So for Twitter, mentions, favorites, retweets. For Facebook, there would be likes, comments, shares, that sort of thing. And then audience gains, and then you can see audience engagement, which for Forbes actually, you get these spikes, I think, usually when Facebook's on. So sometimes it's interesting to turn off the Facebook and look at their audience engagement for Twitter. Because there's not these big outliers, but you see this is pretty typical of what Forbes looks like throughout the week. They're very focused. You can look at their individual messages. Their audience is really very focused on the Northeast, then in California, then in other parts of the world. So you tend to see like from 1 a.m. up to like 10 a.m., there's not too much engagement throughout the week. Then their engagement starts to hit from 10 a.m. throughout the midday, and then into the evening kind of starts to taper off. There's a couple other things that you can see within here. I mean, you can see a more detailed performance report around clicks and that sort of thing, which I guess I'll go into because then you can see individual message reports as well. So, you can see clicks, comments, mentions, likes, retweets, follows. I have the Facebook stuff turned off, so it's not going to show any Facebook stuff. And then you can see, of the messages that you sent out for whatever time period that you have selected in the upper right. So this is over the last 7 days. I can, view by whatever got the most clicks, and then you can go into a single message report and view, when it loads in, which may take a while here. But you can see same kind of thing. So clicks, etc. And this one's not loading up in here, but it's pretty cool when it loads. There's a message flow where you can see which users interacted with the message and at what time they actually interacted, and then you see a heat map, of the world where they were actually clicking on stuff. So I'll see if this will load, but otherwise, that's what's there.
Before you talked about how many posts Twitter and Facebook really like to optimize, and how an organization like Forbes has a metric with more than that. What happens? Do messages fall off the plate? How do you mediate between the customer need, and what's optimal, from the social side?
You mean like as far as like how many messages you should send out? What should you do with the?
Yeah, like you said, they're like 10 or 15 a day, and Forbes is pushing out hundreds. What happens to the ones? Do they not like? Do they not post? What happens to them?
Interesting. So the question is like, what do you do with the excess messages that you don't actually publish to Twitter? So, this is what we found working with The Economist is, they have around 100, 150 stories that come in per day.
Right.
So we bring them into the queue. We figure out which are the best ones to publish to their audience. And then what we would find from the algorithm is that if it publishes, so what they'll do is they'll set those 100 messages to expire at the end of the day. And then we'll say, SocialFlow will say, optimize these messages, send out the ones that make sense at the right time, and then expire the ones that don't go out. So, because they have 100 coming in every day, we'll publish, we found with The Economist that they were doing hashtag heavy stuff too and all this stuff, sending out all other things. We found that by publishing, 15 a day, we found one of their best days, they published 6 tweets, and they had almost better engagement than when they published, 40 or 50, like
right. That's
overall.
what I was looking for. If you publish less, you make it more.
And we just expire it. And there's ways to have other accounts. Like there's things like we work with National Geographic is also a customer. So you have to balance it. Like what's your news that's actually relevant that you want to send out now? And then what's the content that you have that's evergreen? So National Geographic, they have photos. So photos are evergreen. We suck their content all into a big queue, and then we allow it to optimize eternally because, once a year, or a couple times a year, people are going to talk about Afghanistan. That photo of the Afghani girl with the green eyes that you're familiar with will be like maybe the one that sends out at that time or whatever else they have from an inauguration or things like this. So if you have evergreen content, that's a different story. It can sit in a queue and you can use that whenever it's most relevant to your audience because it's not necessarily time sensitive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks.